Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Councilman Curtis Jones. I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee for City Council. I want to thank you for coming to this city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. But quite frankly, the people on this stage will tell you they are not feeling the love. They are not feeling the affection when we have over 560 murders last year, 2,300 non-fatal shootings. Where is that love? What we have done today is pull together a number of stakeholders to take a look at a problem, a crisis in the city of Philadelphia. And what is special about this gathering is not just the findings and recommendations that you're going to have in this report. It is the level of collaboration between departments, the breaking down of silos of those departments to put a problem right at the center of the table and be willing to look at it from different lenses, respecting those lenses, and coming up with solutions. We decided to take the spotlight off of just the problem and put the searchlight on for the solutions. And that's what the 100-shooter report will do and is doing. One of the things that my colleagues often hear me say, and I promise you, you will never hear me say it again after today, is if that 500 whales wound up on the shore of the Delaware, every marine biologist in the world, including Jacques Cousteau's ghost, would come and try to figure out why this tragedy. For the first time, Member Gautier, for the first time, Member Gim, Parker, Green, Johnson, I feel like we have risen this emergency to prominence where we're putting all hands on deck and we're working together because we realize we're in this together. Some of the things that you're going to hear is, how did the shooter become, that trigger puller become the shooter? How did he get there? How did that gun get there? And how, if it happened more than once, this is not their first time at the rodeo, but second and third time, what in the system do we need to tighten up to make sure that we protect citizens and the individuals pulling the trigger? One of the things that we have kind of wrapped our head around, Vanessa, is that public safety isn't versus justice reform. It's not an or, it's an and. And we insist upon the and. I heard one came out of this book. The quote was that when brown and black men get locked up, brown and black women and their children get locked out. Say it again. When brown and black men get locked up, brown and black women and their children get locked out. What does that mean? A spiraling sense of economic disparity happens when they get locked up. So we have to balance that with the other young lady that I talked to, whose son was murdered. And when it was time for her to be a witness, she said, "I'm not going." And when asked why, because her dead son was the victim, she said, "Because I have another son living in that same neighborhood. And without witness protection, there is no justice." We did the figures. I think one year we pledged $160,000 towards witness protection. It equated, if you put that money on every one of the 500 plus homicides, that came out to like $300 a relocation. Well, you cannot ignore, if you're asking this DA to get more witnesses to show up, we have to protect them. And that's a fact. So what we hope to do is this report will either be a blueprint guideline to begin further discussions on how to deal with this epidemic in our city, or it'll sit on the desk collecting dust. What we hope to do with my colleagues is to make sure that we are reviewing every department for how they match up to be solutionaries to this problem in the city of Philadelphia. And again, I want you to know that the most important part of this is that I no longer feel envious of Chester. When we went down there and they were singing Kumbaya about how they cooperate, I have every degree of faith now that we get it, and we're going to work towards that kind of common understanding. We ain't going to always agree. That ain't going to happen. There's too many strong leaders behind me. But we can emphasize the things that we do agree on. Again, let's not spotlight the problem. Let's put the searchlight on the solutions. So I want to thank, first and foremost, my staffer, Samantha Williams. Would you give her a round of applause? She was the straw that stirred the drink of cooperation you see here, and it was not easy. I want to thank Mayor Kenny, and I want to thank our police commissioner, Danielle Outlaw, who goes out there every day putting boots on the ground and dealing with what's going on in our communities. I want to thank DA Larry Krasner, because, the first instinct mostly is to, why do you want to? No, he went head first, opened up, was not afraid to deal with criticism and or observations, and sat at that table, and more importantly, as importantly, the smart people in his office. So thank them, give them a round of applause, please. I want to thank Managing Director Alexander, who is not here today, but has sent Ms. Harley over to represent, and she will be speaking. Thank them for their cooperation. I want to thank the current Chief Defender, Ms. Hudson, and then the former Chief Defender, Ms. Keir Bradford Gray, for their contributions to this. Our City Controller, who is now represented today by Kellen White, right, Kellen? For her website and some of the things that she's been able to enlighten us on. Our Health Commissioner, who helped us look at this in a pandemic way, that violence begets violence just like any other disease. And we are thankful for her observations. And the First Judicial District for their understanding and participation in this report. And without further ado, let's get to work. Samantha Williams, Esquire, please come up and acknowledge the participants.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm Samantha Williams, the Director of Legislation and Policy for Councilmember Jones. I helped coordinate for this project, so I'm here to provide an overview of the committee's work before you'll hear from the agencies. In addition to Councilmember Jones and Councilmember Johnson, this committee was a true collaborative effort between all of our criminal justice agencies in the city, Commissioner Danielle Outlaw and members of her team, District Attorney Larry Krasner and members of his team, Controller Rebecca Reinhart and members of her team, Dr. Ruth Abaya from the Department of Public Health, the Defender Association of Philadelphia, the First Judicial District of Pennsylvania leadership, and representatives from the Managing Director's Office and the Attorney General's Office. The committee was formed in September of 2020 and it has convened several meetings over the last year and a half. The committee's work started by first reviewing data from the previous 100 shootings at the time that the committee was formed, But then the committee quickly expanded the data to review over 2,000 shootings to have a better idea of trends that were affecting the current state of gun violence in our city. The committee members looked at the circumstances shared by those who were committing the shootings, the source of firearms used in those shootings, and prior contacts that these individuals had not just with the criminal justice system, but with other city services. The committee's work then turned to how the agencies can internally and collectively work together to improve gun case outcomes, including improving arrest rates, conviction rates, and issues with bail. Through the dedicated work of the researchers, the data analysis, and staff members of these respective agencies, the committee has released this report, which contains several evidence-based recommendations that we believe will have short-term and long-term impacts on future gun violence in Philadelphia. You'll hear from each of these agencies about how they collaborated and participated in this project and about their individual recommendations, but I would like to turn it over to Councilmember Johnson, member of the committee and chair of the Special Committee on Gun Violence Prevention.
Thank you, Samantha. First and foremost, before I start my brief remarks, I'm going to ask for everyone to give Samantha Williams another round of applause because I was in several meetings with her, and definitely she stepped up to the plate to manage all of the personalities, the different perspectives, to make sure that we got this report done on time. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a person who I worked for at the Philadelphia Old Company store so many moons ago, but a person who's very passionate around addressing the issue of public safety, most importantly, gun violence here in the city of Philadelphia, Councilman Curtis Jones. Give him a round of applause because we had a marathon hearing around the issue of through the Special Committee on Gun Violence. One day we had a marathon hearing addressing this issue, and he said, you know what, we're going to do a deeper dive, and we're going to review. It started with 100 people who have been shot here in the city of Philadelphia, and I think it expanded to over 1,000 people, 2,000 people, which really shows that beyond the cameras, beyond social media, right, we're working on this issue 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. Just because you don't see us working publicly does not mean behind the scenes we aren't texting one another, calling one another, and doing this type of hard work to make sure we save our young people. And so for me, being a part of this collaborative effort is all about making sure that we continue to make sure that this is the number one issue here in the city of Philadelphia. Some things that stuck out to me that I want to make sure that we continue moving forward. One day, Commissioner Outlaw was giving a presentation, and the data revealed that a lot of our shooters were once victims of gun violence themselves. I'm going to say it again. The majority of our shooters were once victims of gun violence themselves. That shows us that we have to take a specific focus on those individuals who are most likely to kill or be killed here in the city of Philadelphia. I've also had another observation that in some areas throughout the city of Philadelphia, we have reduced homicides. Let me say that again. Last year, in 2021, there are some areas in the city of Philadelphia we were able to reduce homicides. And that was through a collaboration between our district attorney, Larry Krasner, and our police commissioner, Danielle Outlaw, and the assistant DAs working with the local police and homicide detectives in solving the homicides that have been taking place here in the city of Philadelphia. And my last major observation that I paid attention to more than anything else is that we're not going to get to the bottom of this issue if we don't work together. The DA have to be talking with our police commissioner have to be talking to our courts, the courts have to be working with probation and parole have to be working with the Office of Violence Prevention, and most importantly, we all must be working with the community. That's the only way. We can always point fingers and say this what this person isn't doing, this what that person isn't doing, but my experience showed me that if we work collaboratively together on this issue, that's the only way we're going to reduce the senseless gun violence that's taking place here in the city of Philadelphia. We have to be communicating, putting our egos to the side. And I'm going to say why we have to put our egos to the side, right, in our titles. I'm a father of 2 black boys. I'm a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, one of 8 Ivy League universities in the country, right? And I didn't have to come back to the city of Philadelphia to get involved in public service. But I thought it was my moral duty to go back to my neighborhood to pay it forward. So some other young black guys who stand on the corner now, like I used to stand on the corner, they say if Kenyatta Johnson can change his life, so can I. So when we get into these silos about our different perspectives on how we can address this issue, just recognize on the other end, the #1 individuals who are dying day in and day out are black boys. And as Councilman Jamie Gaudier always says, it's a matter of social justice. I'm going to say it again, it's a matter of social justice. Because the reality is, if it wasn't black and brown boys dying on a day-to-day basis, and they were people of another complexion, I have to be quite upfront and say it, I think the response would be different. We saw with the opioid crisis, and people in my neighborhood have been getting high off of heroin for years. When it came out into the suburbs in rural America, we had a different type of response. We need to keep up the pressure on this issue, because at the day in and day out, I'm talking to mothers, like I'll talk to today, because they lost a loved one to senseless gun violence. And I do this on a regular, without the cameras, just because that's what it's all about. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, and I'm going to turn it over to council. I want to turn it over to Commissioner Danielle Outlaw, but I want to again acknowledge my colleague. This was some hard work, sir. Thank you. Keep up the good work, and let's make sure we make these recommendations come to life. And this is a living, breathing document. Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you to the mayor, the office of the managing director, our city council members, specifically Councilmember Curtis Jones, chair of the Public Safety Committee, and Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson, wherever you just went, chair of the Special Committee on Gun Violence, the District Attorney's Office, the City Controller, Department of Health, the First Judicial District, the Defender Association, and all of their members and staff for their continued efforts to combat violent gun crimes in the city of Philadelphia. I say all of their names because it's important to know that it's not just falling upon the shoulders of the Philadelphia Police Department. Everyone recognized themselves in this project as stakeholders in addressing this issue, and I think it's very important that we publicly acknowledge them. We remain focused on fighting the surge of violent crime that continues to plague our neighbors and our communities. The report released today, this report, highlights the urgent need to remain consistent with our crime-fighting efforts, coupled with proportionate consequences to stop the senseless loss of lives. Anyone who lives in our beautiful city or watches the news is well aware of the gun violence crisis that our city is facing right now. Anyone, all over the country and internationally. Sadly, many of our own community members have fallen victim to gun crimes in this city. Just yesterday, I was standing in front of the Jerome Brown Playground discussing the importance of funding for police departments. We were standing at that playground for a reason. In August of 2020, a young girl by the name of Simone Monet Rogers was gunned down while she was playing basketball with her brother and 2 friends. Simone Monet was a completely innocent victim, and the bullets that struck her were not intended for her. I bring this up because I spoke with her mom yesterday, and I've met with many, many mothers who are still dealing with the burden of losing their child. Some mothers enduring multiple losses. Simone Monet isn't the only person that was struck by stray gunfire over the last few years. There have been far too many. Lives of human beings, not statistics, not numbers. Human beings are being cut tragically short by gunfire. A generation of people are being exterminated by gunfire, the majority of whom look like me, my family, my sons. Individuals are being impacted for the rest of their lives by gunfire, psychologically and physically. Families, friends, communities are suffering from the long-term effects of violent crime and are forever changed by repeated and sustained violent acts. Gun crimes affect all of us, all of us. We know this impact that violent crime has on victims themselves, but what we often don't see reflected in shooting victims and homicide counts are the lives affected by this violence, those who are left to deal with these impacts. We know what the drivers of violent crime are. We know that the drivers often involve drugs, arguments, we talked about social media, domestic abuse, and very often these perpetrators are in possession of an illegal firearm. Despite the increase in shootings and homicides over the last several years, our department has proactively addressed gun violence, deploying officers to hot spots to reduce the number of shooting incidents and using data to direct our resources to support our anti-shooting efforts. But we realize that's not enough. In a renewed effort to fight violent crime in 2022, in an effort to increase our visibility, we've taken officers out of special units and put them back on patrol to have more boots on the ground. And we're continuing to use data and intelligence to guide our officer deployments, putting more officers in areas that need more police presence. Additionally, very, very soon, our new non-fatal shooting unit will begin operations. This unit, which will work very closely with our homicide unit, was created to centralize our efforts, our detectives, by investigating non-fatal shootings across our city. Analysts will be assigned to work side by side with our investigators to develop information and leads based on shared intelligence and data. We're also expanding our use of DNA analysis to solve crimes. I also hope to promote additional detectives in the upcoming weeks to assist with increasing caseloads of our investigators. There's been many facets of the police department that we've been working behind the scenes that you don't always see, not just with our investigators and our shootings, into our shootings and our homicides. These renewed efforts not only serve as a deterrent to violent crime through increased clearance rates, but also to restore our community's faith in their criminal justice system. The apprehension of offenders committing violent crimes and carrying guns illegally remain the #1 top priority for the Philadelphia Police Department. Shootings and ultimately homicides should not happen, period. And the rate that these incidences are occurring are alarming, sickening, and completely unacceptable. In closing, it will take a village, the village that you see here, to address the systemic cause of this crisis, and we are committed to collaborative strategies and applaud this report for its dedication to lasting progress through partnership. Thank you for being here today.
You forgot your duty to bring up the list.
DA Krasner's next. Sorry about that.
I would never suggest the commissioner forgot her duty. I don't see it that way at all. I think she does a great job. First of all, I could repeat all the names, but I want to respect everyone's time. Every name that was mentioned, and the commissioner did mention them all, because she's right. We are all together. We are all on the hook to do right. We are all on the hook to do together. I don't want to go through all the names, but I do want to say that, I have to say, that I am extremely grateful to my team at the District Attorney's Office. For those of you who do not know, we have a first ever in the history of the DA's office data lab, grant funded, that does amazing work and has done amazing work in this report. This is a great report. This was a great idea. I think to a large extent, the great idea of Councilmember Jones and Councilmember Johnson. I said it in the middle of the process, even though they were working me to death. I said it in the middle of the process because it's really true. It has caused types of collaboration that I think might not have occurred otherwise. And this has been a truly collaborative effort that has built trust among the different agencies. It has forged relationships among these different groups who need to work together. I can tell you there was a snowy day not so long ago when my data lab team didn't stop working on finalizing one of the last drafts of this report, and I know because they were driving me crazy all day, and I was on the phone talking to some of the other people who are up here, modifying little bits here and little bits there, and I think the product that has come of it is outstanding. It is important. It is an almost unique example of uniting a public health perspective with the perspectives of law enforcement from all their different duties. Now, having said that, As these silos started to break down and are breaking down even further, and there's nothing unusual about silos in government, that's just real. But as that has happened, I think it doesn't just suggest that we got a great report to leave on the table. I think what it suggests is that we now need to continue this effort. We need to continue it with action. So I will just give you a little hint as to where some of this action I think might come. I mentioned earlier the concept of 57 blocks, a phrase that the Philadelphia Inquirer came up with in some outstanding journalism they did about the locations in Philly where there have been just a ton of shootings and killings with guns over a period of time. There's a lot of wisdom in looking at those places, and there's a lot of wisdom in all of our coming together to address those places. This city was pretty good at taking resources out of those places, destabilizing them, and getting them to the point where we have so much harm. We should all be pretty good at putting resources back in. And none of those resources will be more important than resources that are directed at trauma, that are directed at victims, that are directed at protecting witnesses. None of them will be more important than that. None will be more important than directing resources at the kid who looks out the window, who sees the blood in the street after something terrible happens, because that is trauma. And it's not just trauma for the person hit with the bullet or the family of that person. It is trauma everywhere close to that location in every one of those 57 blocks. So I look forward to the opportunity to work with all of these partners, all these collaborators, all these friends up here on how we can bring some resources to that and do something about that. I love this report. I hope all you get a chance to actually read it. I think it actually exists in so many different important dimensions. It even exists in the dimension of turning discussions around criminal justice into something that is scientific in the way that medicine is scientific, in the way that we have taken for granted. I have to give a lot of credit to the Philadelphia Police Department. I always do, but let me give some more now, for having such outstanding data analysts, for doing such outstanding criminological work, and for being willing to collaborate so closely with our data lab to see what it is we can all do better. And yes, I know the DA's office can do better. I know we can all do better, and I want to support all of my partners up here any way I can in that collaboration. So I hope you really will read it, and don't just read the text. Read the tables, read the graphs, look at all the color pictures, look at it all, because there is a lot that is in there, and it is a lot that points forward in the right direction. At this time, it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce our new public defender. And I see we have a prior public defender, Keir Bradford Gray, with whom I really enjoyed an outstanding connection and relationship while we were both in our positions. But we are also blessed to have the very wonderful Keisha Hudson, who is here after a very long and distinguished career in many different ways in criminal justice. Public Defender Hudson.
Thank you. Thank you, DA Krasner. I am Keisha Hudson, the new Chief Public Defender. I have only been in the role for a grand total of 7 weeks. So I'm thrilled to see that my predecessor, Keir Bradford Gray, is here, and just want to extend my thanks to her for her leadership in getting us involved at the invitation of Councilmember Jones, because we are a critical stakeholder in this conversation in terms of where we go forward in addressing this crisis. I also want to give a shout out to our policy team that worked incredibly hard to provide critical data that is a part of this report, and invite you all again to take a look at our recommendations. Obviously, the gun violence crisis is issue number one for our city. And the Defender Association is an enthusiastic partner in any effort to develop solutions to make Philadelphia safe for everyone. Not only is gun violence a public health crisis, it is a racial justice emergency. We know that the victims and arrestees are overwhelmingly people of color, with young black men most at risk of being murdered. The policy decisions we make today almost exclusively impact people of color and their families. As public defenders, we also know that the way to frame the issue as one where there are victims and perpetrators is a little misguided. The reality is, yesterday's victim of a violent crime is too often the defendant that walks through our doors tomorrow. There's a frequent overlap between people who participate in community violence and those most often victimized. Councilmember Johnson discussed this in his remarks, but we have specific data point here that I think is really critical to share. 82% of the clients we represent with pending first-degree felony charges had been the victim of or witness to violent crime before they turned 18. 82% of our clients. When it comes to gun violence, everyone involved is a victim. We're also here because we know that the causes of gun violence are complex and solutions will only come because of hard work and collaboration with all the justice system stakeholders. We may not agree on each other's recommendations or all of the recommendations, but we agree that the solutions should be guided by what the data tells us about gun violence. And to reiterate what many of us have already said here today, collaboration is key. And the defender is committed to a robust participation in this process. Even all the knowledge, experiences, and resources assembled here today, though, are not enough. We as a justice system also need to actively partner with the community organizations working in the affected neighborhoods and fighting every day to put an end to gun violence. As we continue to collaborate, these advocates also must be at the table with us moving forward. We also need significant financial investment in community-led, non-government solutions that prioritize culturally competent, trauma-informed interventions, long-term social supports, and workforce development in these communities most impacted by gun violence. The justice system naturally plays a role, but that role should be in support of the leadership role played by our community partners and activists. I want to close by extending yet another round of thanks to Councilmember Jones for inviting us to participate in this process, and we are looking forward to working with everyone here and community leaders and activists and organizations to put many of these recommendations into reality. Thank you. And I will introduce Vanessa Garrett-Hartley, the Managing Director's Office. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I echo all the sentiments that you just heard from everyone else. So in the interest of time, we'll try to be as brief as possible. On behalf of the Managing Director's Office, Mayor Kinney, and the administration, we are here because we recognize that there is no greater problem plaguing the city of Philadelphia than the gun violence that we have all been experiencing. This report and this collaboration is crucial because, just as everyone else has said, but I can't emphasize it enough, we have to come together. There's no one entity that is part of this criminal justice system that could solve this problem alone. Key in this is the community. We don't want to leave out our community members. I just want to be, again, echo the thanks that many have gave to all those who participated in this study. There's some real content experts from all of these different agencies and departments that you see up here who have put in countless hours, both working on this report and just coming together, talking and trying to come up with solutions to our gun violence problem that we see here. A special thank you to Councilman Jones and also Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, both of whom have been helping us, working with us, and I know take to heart and feel much like I do about the importance of this gun violence problem. I could say that to you because sometimes I'm on the phone with them, whether it's 11 o'clock at night, midnight, or whatever, but we try to collaborate as much as we can. Again, I believe that our police department, the DA's office, the controller's office, our health department, our first judicial district, our probation officers, everybody understands that this has got to be a #1 priority for the city, and it's the only way that we're going to be able to solve it. This report highlights that collaboration does work and that we can come together and we can work together. The report also highlights and makes a number of recommendations with whom we agree. In fact, we agree so much we have already been instituting a number of the recommendations that are in place, and that includes some of the programs that we have put in place in terms of like place and person-based strategies such as our gun violence intervention program, as well as the community piece I can't emphasize enough with the help of city City Council, we've been able to give out these community grants. We just had over $12.5 million that was given out in the community expansion grants. We're still giving out targeted community investment grants, which are a little bit smaller, but all of these were targeted towards those grassroots organizations that have been on the ground doing this work, even before all of us got together in the manner in which we are, because they are living it, they are feeling it, and there's very few people, I think, up here in this room or in this city that look like me, that don't know somebody who has been touched by this gun violence, whether it's your friend, your neighbor, your family, your church member, whatever. So this is real, and we take it to heart. It means a whole lot to many of us, and I know most of the folks up here are just as passionate as I am about it. So I thank you for allowing us to participate in this. The Managing Director's Office will continue to participate. The mayor has pledged that this is number one priority in the city. It's difficult. We have limited resources. We are affected by what some would call a trifecta almost, with the pandemic and then the gun violence that we're experiencing, as well as all of the impacts from the pandemic has had on our economic situation and our staffing shortages. But again, we will do everything it takes to continue to try to address this problem. Thank you.
I want to acknowledge my state partner who is here, Senator Vincent Hughes, and he's not just here to applaud. He and the governor and other members of the delegation are bringing $15 million to deal with grants for small grants to groups that are boots on the ground. And we want to thank him for putting up, and we appreciate it. Yeah, 15 million gets more than that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Before we go into Q&A, one of the recommendations that came out of, I believe, the health department might have been, was striking. It said that a number of these shooters had touch points in the system well before they ever became shooters. And they were waving and they were telling us, I need help. I need someone to intervene, whether it's troubles at home, whether it's troubles in the community. They were in school acting out, saying, hey, I need some help. And we ignored them. We have to have better listening skills and red flags that kind of indicate that we need to intervene before they ever get into trouble. Desmond Tutu said that we spend so much time pulling people out of the river that we should go upstream and figure out why they ever found themselves in the river in the first place. And we, in this report, are trying to focus on that. With that, questions for our participants. So here's the good news, that I've sat in enough of the meetings of GVI and the police department to know that there is a, what is it called, dashboard being developed. Vanessa, can you talk about the programs that are going to be in those, I heard it yesterday, so I know it's real.
So I think he's referring to a dashboard where we want to be able to put out statistics about all the information. But if I were answering your question, there is a violence hotline that we hope to launch in March, thanks to Council President Clark, who has very much helped to spearhead this, working with us, where people can call with those very kind of questions that you have as to where our resources, potentially those resources and other things can go. There are also programs that come not necessarily under all of the agencies that are up here, but even under our Department of Human Services, where juvenile justice rests in this city. There are a multitude of prevention programs and other things that may be eligible, as well as some of the what others would call out-of-school time programs that are programs that may be centered off of some of the education or academic programs to give you. I understand. I totally understand. I do understand and share that sentiment, and I think we all want our children to feel safe in all aspects. We all want to feel safe as we move around the city as well, but I assure you that we're doing everything we know how to do to try to develop that level of safety and comfort in where we're moving, and I think this is the beginning of work that was already being done, but now it is the beginning of work that's being done a little less siloed and a little more together to try to solve that problem that we collectively have to solve.
My majority leader reminded me that she is, and we are, working towards a book resource guide, too, by councilmanic district, to be able to say, if I live in West Philly, here are the things that are available to my child. Here are the intervention programs that are run in my area. That's what we are working towards, so that you know there's a chess club over at so-and-so. And one of the things, and Senator Hughes is helping me to do this, maybe I shouldn't tell my other colleagues, but we want a Boys and Girls Club. And why we want that we're getting one, right? Why we want that is because they provide transportation to and from safely, to programs. And that is so important. And we are looking at every department through a different lens to say, how can we keep our babies safe? And whether it's SEPTA and providing boots on the ground, police officers on those L's so that your daughter can look up and see a uniform and feel safer, that's what we are incrementally going to make sure we do during the budget process.
I have a quick question. With the findings and the report and everything, who needs to sign off? What happens next so that we can make sure that, this is going to go into effect and kids are going to remain safe? Because I think yesterday's shooting was maybe the third shooting this year of a kid in front of near a school.
So to answer your question, will all my council member colleagues raise your hand, please? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. That means you, right? So that's enough votes to make sure that every one of these recommendations that are in this book wind up in someone's budget, so that we're not just talking about forensic expansion of their lab, that we find money for it, and that we're committed to giving you the tools. I was in your meeting as well yesterday, where a simple thing, like providing hundreds of cell phones to homicide officers, you would think in a city like ours that was a given. The young people out there are running rings around us technologically, and we're just now giving them cell phones. So this is something that we're playing catch up, quite frankly, to try to make our city safe, and we're not going to stop. I already cashed Senator Hughes $15 million to put it towards it. So we can talk about that.
So when you say that you're going to vote on it, the council's going to vote on it when?
Oh, during the
I'm
budget.
just trying to find out
So some of this is already happening. Like, they didn't wait for us to finish this report to start collaborating. That's the beauty of what I found out. And that what we will continue to do is we're not going to just point the finger and say, well, do it without straw for your bricks. No, if you need a new lab, let's find the money for it. And so we want to be partners in this regard. So it's already started, and it will continue during the budget process. And we have our senator here, who is real close with the governor. Right? Yeah, come on up.
Let me do this. The city of Philadelphia is paying the cost for state gun laws that don't work. I'm going to say it again. The city of Philadelphia is paying the cost for state gun laws that are not relevant to the reality that exists in Philadelphia and in fact, for most communities all across the state of Pennsylvania. So, last week, we were together. A number of us were together. We announced a 50% increase in violence prevention funds from the state of Pennsylvania. So we took it from $30 to $45 million. That's to go out to neighborhood-based violence prevention organizations. Yesterday, the announcement was made of who's going to get those dollars. Out of the $24 million that was announced, over $15 million went to the city of Philadelphia. Councilman Green, you're a better mathematician than I. That's over 50%. That's over 50%. Those are the dollars that go into neighborhood-based organizations to help them deal with the fact that the city is paying the cost for state gun laws that are not responsive and are contributors to the violence and the hell that's on these streets. Now, why do I say that? It's the next step, because it's an action step. Everything that's in this report is either being done or on its way to be done. But the state has a responsibility. And this is the charge. And I'm sorry, Councilman,
no, go ahead.
But I wasn't planning, but you got me going, okay?
15 million get you
all right, you got me going. And Gim knows where I'm going with this. There's $8 billion of unspent money in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, designed partly by President Biden and Vice President Harris to come to states and come to local communities to help deal with the hell and the problems that they're confronting. It's sitting there. Sitting there on Monday. Parker, you were in Harrisburg. On Monday, the state will report that it's running $300 million above estimate for the state's budget surplus. That money deserves to be in communities and neighborhoods, to invest in these neighborhood-based organizations, to give the commissioner what she needs, to give the DA what he needs, to give the public defenders, finally, as the only state in the nation that does not have state-dedicated funding for the public defenders, to give the money that they deserve. You gave me the mic. So the charge is this. Really, after we leave here, this is the charge. Go to Harrisburg. Go to the senators and representatives who are not from Philadelphia. Not from Philadelphia. Go to the other ones who, quite frankly, are seeing dramatic increases in violent crime in their communities. And in fact, according to FBI statistics, those increases are higher than the city of Philadelphia. I always talk about the city. I always talk about you. But the increases in communities all across Pennsylvania, Bradford, Clarion, all the rest of them, Greene, all the rest of them, where there aren't no black people. You hear what I'm saying? Where their own communities, mostly white, are catching hell. But they ignore their own people, go to them. Demand an increase. Demand that law enforcement gets what is deserved. Because I know under these two people, all right, we're going to get some justice in their law enforcement process. All right? Give the councilmen and all the council people and everybody, all these communities, the resources that they're demanding. That's the charge. This is damn good work. This is damn good work. It's time we invest in it. Don't just sit around and other folks across Pennsylvania blame the city for what it's going through. We're the largest economic driver in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Invest in this driving force. You send your children to our universities. You send out your children to our hospitals and our healthcare institutions looking for help. Invest in them. Invest in this community. The charge for everyone here is to stay to the state of Pennsylvania. Put up. If you're going to give us gun laws that just unleash violence all across our community, it's damn sure time you put the money to protect the neighborhoods and the citizens who are not just living in that hell, but driving the economy in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
You're a boss. Whoa. Tell us, Senator, how you really feel.
What's wrong?
I heard that.
We've never had that kind of budget, extra money in Harrisburg.
Never.
Yes.
Since a lot of this stuff has to do with kids, why isn't the school district involved in this at all? And also, can we get a copy of the entire report and not just the executive summary? Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
That is a good question. We did invite Kevin Bethel, who deals with. He was? Yes, he was. Okay. He was in the audience. He had to go. But they are critical partners in this. One of the follow-up things that we are going to do, I was talking to Member Gim earlier and my colleagues as well, is that we do in West Philly a weekly Monday morning roll call. And what that is all of the schools, the principals, in particular the at-risk, high, intense acts of violence in those schools are on this call. And we review what happened this week, who was fighting who, and what we found out that was not in this report, but we'll add plenty of appendixes and amendments, that most of those principals don't know what is available to them to help those students. That's half the battle. And so at Overbrook, my principal's putting out fires, running around, keeping people safe. But when the kid comes in her office with 2 book bags, yeah, but I'm getting abused at home. And I'm feeling some kind of way, and I may act out. Knowing where she can get help for that child is critical. What was in this report is that many of those kids had touch points with the system well before saying, hey, I need help. So you're right, the school district has to be partners within this. And we some of these things have happened in spite of and because of this report. We all, is that it? Okay.
So a lot of these recommendations seem like things that should have been happening for a long time, building trust with communities, improving gun case outcomes. Why have they not been happening, and what is it about putting them in this report that you think is going to make them happen?
I have faith. That's number one. Somebody take a picture of them standing next to each other. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't look at me like that. But I'm so happy that my partners, I have faith that we are, because of this report, going to collaborate at a level yet unseen. And yes, you're right, some of these things have happened, should have happened, but for sure, we're putting the spotlight of the report on those issues so that they will happen coming in this year to come. So, if they don't, we'll be right back here at budget time. And I'm scared that the senator won't bring another $15 million to continue this. So we are all holding ourselves accountable. We're all in this together, and I have every degree of confidence with everybody on this stage, in particular my members. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Councilmember. Thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you. Thank you.
We got a whole report on her. Turn off the mic.